drone attack on the world's largest oil processing facility in Saudi Arabia is having knock-on effects around the globe. In Australia, discussions are now turning to our domestic production of oil and gas. Prime Minister Scott Morrison has also toned down talk of military action against Iran following discussions with US President Donald Trump. Sky News Darwin Bureau Chief Matt Canavan spoke to Resources Minister Matt Canavan a short time ago.
Matt Canavan, thanks for joining us. There's been some interesting comments overnight by the Prime Minister about Australia and our likely involvement in any military action that might take place in the Middle East. Do you think Australia should be showing restraint in this area, or are we going in with the US sort of hell or high water?
No, look, we always, of course, make our own decisions based on our own strategic interests. But, of course, we're also a great friend of the United States as well. We have shared objectives in wanting to make sure that there is peaceful sea lanes and trade, not just in the Middle East, but around the world. And while it might seem like the Middle East is a long way from here in Australia, it's an important part of the world, and we have made important contributions in the past to actions in the Middle East. And I think the government's decisions and the Prime Minister's statements are consistent with our past involvement in the Middle East, and will continue, of course, to stand up for fair, open and peaceful relations between nations.
So if the US did decide to pursue military action in Iran, we wouldn't necessarily definitely be going in there behind?
Of course, we'll make our own decisions based on the merits or otherwise of each individual case. Obviously, these matters are extremely weighty and need to be weighed up by the government very carefully. And but as I said, our objectives are clear. Our objectives and values won't change, and we'll continue to stand up for peaceful trade and operations. And where there's a case to do so, we'll of course seek to make sure they're enforced around the world as well.
We've seen these drone strikes on Saudi oil assets. What are the implications for us here in Australia, particularly given our fuel reserves are so low? I think just 3 weeks in reserve when it comes.
That's of some types of fuel, yeah. So we've got roughly on average about 40 days, and look, we've got ability to source oil from a variety of countries around the world. So there's no imminent risk to those issues. And indeed, while the strike obviously is extremely concerning, as you've seen on world oil markets, and the President's decision to release more oil from their strategic reserve, that hasn't had a major impact on supply, some impact on price, but supply of oil is there, and I'm confident that will continue in the near future. But of course, oil security is an important issue. It's why I'm an advocate that we continue to explore for new oil opportunities.
So onshore oil you're talking about rather than offshore oil?
Well, both types, but here in the Northern Territory, as you know, Matt, there's a significant opportunity in the Beetaloo Basin. There may be some liquids there as well as gas. Certainly, look at what's happened in the US. 10, 15 years ago, the US was the largest net importer of oil in the world. In the next few years, they're likely to be a net oil exporter for the first time in more than 50 years. That is all due to this amazing technological developments in extracting shale oil and shale gas. Now, the Beetaloo Basin in the Northern Territory is the first shale opportunity in Australia, first major one. And it's great that it's here in the Territory for you guys, but it's also of a national interest in my view. Given what's happened in the US, we should also be seeking to apply similar technologies here as well. You
made similar comments at the CEOC conference here a few weeks ago, but since then we've seen those events in Saudi Arabia. Has that upped the ante on this at all? And has that?
Oh, it hasn't changed our. The federal government's been supporting this development, for a decade, going back to previous governments as well, and we certainly, the Liberal National Government, the last 6 years have been urging the Northern Territory to develop this resource, and we're glad that that's happening now. So not one event hasn't changed. I mean, the risk of these type of events were there 3 months ago, so we're well aware of those things. It makes sense then to continue to look for oil and gas, particularly because it takes a long time, right? I mean, it's great the Northern Territory has now lifted the moratorium here, but it's going to take probably at least 5 years before substantial amounts of hydrocarbons flow from the Beetaloo Basin.
Just back on the Prime Minister's visit, obviously a major part of this is going to be how he negotiates the China issue. Does Australia need to send a message to President Trump that China is an important trading partner for us and that it needs to perhaps back off a little bit with what's going on with that trade war between the US?
Look, I mean, I don't. I think always in diplomatic and friendly relations with other countries, you don't send a message, so to speak, and so I'm not going to accept that particular characterisation. But of course, we forthrightly put Australia's views on the world stage. We do so to China, we do so to the United States, and again, our values are consistent here that we are forthright champions of free and open and fair trade across the world. As the Prime Minister has said before, we can see the United States' perspective on some of the issues they've raised about China's trade practices, but we'd like to see them, of course, resolve cooperatively because we very much think it's in the interests of the whole world for trading relations to continue on a cooperative and fair basis. And it's very much, I'd say, also in the interests of the United States and China too.
Do you think that the Prime Minister should go to Beijing and meet with Xi Jinping?
Well, look, I'll leave that to the Prime Minister and to his plans. We've tried to maintain communication, ministerial communications with the Chinese government. I'm always open to discussions. We haven't always been welcome there over the last few years. And look, that's a challenging environment that we just try and work through. We're just trying to put the best interests of Australia forward. Of course, we want to see continuing developing trading and business relations with China. Takes two to tango, though, and I'm also going to be proactively trying to seek other relationships as well. That's why I was in India last month, fastest growing major economy in the world, obviously about to be the biggest country in the world too. And next week I'm in South Korea and Japan doing similar things, trying to promote trading relations, particularly to promote opportunities in critical minerals like rare earths and lithium and hydrogen too.
Matt Canavan, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Matt. Have a good day.